Hi, friends. We're dying to know which cities you're listening to us from, so hurry up, give us a like, and write in the comments where you're from, and also share. What shocking stories have happened in your city, or maybe even with you personally? Subscribe, because the next story might just be about your area, or even your own personal drama. Subscribe so you don't miss out. And now, let's dive into a new exciting story. Sociology of Deception. Jacob Jake Reynolds sat in his spacious, light wood office, going over the papers for the case he had just won. He was 42 years old, but his eyes still sparkled with the enthusiasm of a young lawyer who once, with the tenacity of a freshman, was eager to change the world for the better. He has worked in the human rights field, specializing in complex cases of discrimination and unfair dismissal. Just today, he achieved a historic victory. His client, a migrant worker who was illegally fired by a large corporation, was reinstated with significant compensation. "I'm proud of you," Jake's wife, Allison Reynolds, said over the phone when he called her to share the good news. "You have proven once again that justice exists." There was genuine joy and tenderness in her voice. They had spent the last 10 years building a seemingly perfect life together. Both had distinguished careers. Jake became one of the most respected human rights lawyers in the city, and Allison became a sociology professor at the local university. She lectured on social institutions and family values, and often spoke in the press as an expert supporting progressive views on marriage, equality, and public morality. "Eli, I want us to have dinner together today. I'll take the wine, and you can choose a restaurant," he suggested, checking his watch. "Sounds great, but let's stay at home." "I'll cook something special," she answered enthusiastically. "Consider this my congratulations to you for yet another one case." Jake smiled. A feeling of warmth and calm spread throughout his body. He loved that even after so many years of marriage, they still found time to celebrate each other's successes. It was an unspoken ritual, small family gatherings where they talked about the future, hopes, and plans. After finishing the conversation, Jake sat down in a leather chair, closed his eyes, and gave himself a minute to just enjoy the silence. Everything in his life was like an ideal picture. A loving wife, a good job, friendly friends. One of these friends, Tom Kendall, was not only his closest companion from his youth, but also now a promising politician running for Congress. Over the years, Tom has assisted Jake many times with public campaigns and legislation, and Jake has in turn assisted him with the legal aspects of his political work. In the evening, Jake returned to their country house, located in a cozy green area of suburban America, a two-story cottage with a neat garden and a white fence. Once upon a time, he and Allison chose this house for a long time, wanting to find a place where they could raise children. But the children were not destined to appear in their family, and they were left alone. Despite the empty children's rooms, there was always a light and warm atmosphere in the house. The walls were decorated with photographs, drawings, and posters with quotes about equality and freedom. "You're already home," Allison exclaimed when she heard the front door slam. She ran out into the corridor, wearing an apron with a small flower. "Congratulations. Here I prepared pasta, salad, and baked vegetables. We also have the wine that you love so much." Allison had a smile on her face. She was always proud of Jake's achievements. He took off his jacket, hung it on a hanger, and walked up to his wife to hug her. "Thank you, dear. I am so pleased that you support all my endeavors." He kissed her tenderly on the cheek. "Of course, I support it. You make this world a better place," she said, turning around to go to the kitchen. "But I had a hard day today. Students have been so lazy lately. I'm already tired of explaining basic things about ethics and family institutions." They sat down at the table, in the center of which stood a bottle of white wine. The table was decorated with sprigs of rosemary and a candle in a transparent candlestick. At such moments, Jake felt absolutely happy. "You haven't forgotten that our anniversary is in a week, right?" Allison asked, taking a bite of a crispy baguette. "Of course not." Jake was sincerely surprised. 10 years since we got married, but it still feels like yesterday." He took her hand. Allison smiled, but behind this smile there was a shadow of fatigue or something else that he could not see then. However, Jake attributed this to difficulties with work and students who, according to his wife, showed less and less interest in sociology. "I think we can fly somewhere again," Jake suggested. "Do you think maybe Hawaii?" "I have a conference soon," Allison frowned. "But maybe later." They continued their dinner, remembering pleasant moments from the past. At the end of the evening, Jake helped his wife clear the table. While stacking the plates, he accidentally touched a glass, and it fell to the floor with a dull thud, breaking into pieces. "Be careful." Allison was alarmed. "This was our wedding set." "Damn. Sorry, I didn't notice." Jake began to collect the fragments. When they went to bed, Jake hugged Allison, and before falling asleep, he thought once again how lucky he was to have a wife who shared his values and ideas. She preached loyalty and love. Yes, sometimes she did not have enough time for marital joys because of her studies and work, but he never doubted her honesty. A few days after celebrating his victory in court, Jake arrived at the university to meet Allison after her lecture. They were going to go to Thomas Kendall's election event together. Tom had been Jake's close friend since college. They had once played on the basketball team together and shared a modest dorm room. Unlike Jake, Tom chose the political path, and now he faced a serious race for a seat in Congress. "Are you waiting for Allison?" asked Linda Morgan, his wife's colleague, as she approached him in the university lobby. Linda was a woman of about 50, with a stern look and short hair. Her face was full of anxiety. "She's delayed for some reason." "Yes, I told her that I'd arrive at 3 o'clock, Jake answered, looking at his watch. It was already 3:15, but I think it's okay. I'll wait. "She's been late a lot lately," Linda noted with a slight sigh. "He says that there is a lot of work on new projects." Jake smiled politely and just shrugged, but something in Linda's tone seemed alarming to him. He knew that his wife had been busy with scientific papers and conference preparations in recent months. Allison often talked about how times are changing, how the level of awareness of society in matters of fidelity and stability of marriage is growing. In a word, she always had topics for research. Still, there was doubt in Linda's voice. "How long have you been working with Allison?" He decided to clarify, trying to catch her reaction. "Since she defended her doctorate and came to us as a young teacher," Linda answered. "She seemed so sincere then, so inspired." She wanted to add something else, but stopped in time, noticing that Allison was heading towards them. The wife looked a little worried and was in a hurry. "Sorry, I'm late. We had a little force majeure here," she said, going up to Jake and kissing him on the cheek. "Linda, can you send me the results of the survey after the seminar? I haven't had time to look yet." "Of course," Linda nodded curtly. Her gaze slid from Allison to Jake, lingered for a moment, and she walked away to the elevator, frowning. "She's kind of strange," Jake noted as they walked out of the building onto the street. "No, just problems with the research." Allison waved it off. "Let's not talk about work. We need to get to a meeting with Tom, and then we are going to dinner. Have you forgotten?" "Of course not." Jake gave her his hand, and they walked to the car. "By the way, you said that your conference will be in a month. Are you still planning to fly there?" "Yes, this is an important part of my scientific activity. I'd like to take you with me, but you're always busy," she said with a grin. "I will have a hearing in court." Jake threw up his hands. "But if I win this case, we will be able to go on vacation again, like last year." There was suddenly a tense pause in the air. Allison looked away as Jake opened his car door. It seemed to him that his wife wanted to say something, but then changed her mind. Finally, she sighed and sat down in the salon, trying to look as usual. But Jake noticed that there was some kind of restless note in her behavior. When they got to the place where Tom was holding a meeting with his supporters, Allison immediately unhooked Jake and went to discuss something with the politician's assistants. Jake stood back, watching her. Tom walked up to him, opening his arms for a friendly hug. "Hello, buddy." "Good to see you," Tom greeted, smiling widely. "You have always supported me, and I appreciate that." "Of course," Jake replied, returning the handshake. Are you already at the finish line before the primaries? That's right. There are elections in 3 months, and I hope to win. After all, my election program is aimed at supporting social rights, and your work is an excellent example of how you can help people. Tom smiled, nodding towards Allison. By the way, your wife is helping us with some sociological research. Very smart. I know, Jake nodded proudly. She's generally very talented in everything she does. Tom chuckled. A few minutes later, Tom became distracted by other guests, and Allison seemed to avoid direct contact with her husband as much as possible. He thought she was busy with her duties to Tom's campaign. After the event, she and Allison were about to leave when Tom's assistant jumped up to them and called her aside, whispering about some important documents. Jake, left alone, noticed that his wife's phone was in her purse, which was left nearby. An incoming message flashed on the screen. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the sender's name, T, and the phrase, "See you later." But then I didn't attach any importance to it. Perhaps this is another curator or someone from Tom's team. Allison soon returned, threw the phone into her bag, and took Jake's arm. "Let's go home, I'm terribly tired," she said with a tired smile. Jake didn't ask anything. He had not yet noticed any signals except for this slight tension that had appeared in Allison in recent weeks. He was too confident in the ideal strength of their relationship to allow even a shadow of doubt. The whole evening passed in silence. While they were driving in the car, Allison had a languid conversation about the need for reforms in education, that students were no longer inquisitive, that the system needed change. Jake agreed, but couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was happening. But he was a rational man and believed that there was no point in giving in to paranoia. "We need to get some sleep," he muttered when they returned home. "Tomorrow I have to go to court. I have a new difficult consultation." "Good night," Allison answered somehow coldly and, without kissing him, went to the shower. A week after that campaign event at Tom's, Jake was working late in his office. He was preparing documents for a new case of gender discrimination. His client was a female engineer who was abruptly fired after she alleged harassment from her boss. Jake was going to prove in court that it was an illegal dismissal in order to hush up the scandal. Late in the evening, returning to an empty house, he was surprised. Usually, when he comes so late, Allison is already asleep, or at least leaves him a note. But she was neither seen nor heard, except that a faint light was burning in the living room. He walked inside and called, "Allison," but the answer was silence. Then he noticed her phone left on the sofa. "Strange," he muttered. Allison was one of those who never left her phone for a minute. She always carried it with her, arguing that in the modern world one cannot remain offline for too long. "My students, colleagues, and Tom, everyone can contact me at any time," she often said, and the mobile itself was intended to be always nearby. Jake automatically reached for the device. He was just going to see if there were any messages indicating where she might be. But the moment he picked up the phone, a new notification arrived. A message appeared on the screen. "I'm already bored." The sender was listed as Contact T2. At first, Jake didn't even understand who it was, but then it dawned on him. T2. Probably Tom Kendall. But why would Tom write such a message late at night? Excitement pierced his chest. He didn't want to get into his wife's personal space, but something inside him pushed him. "This is your wife, your marriage. You need to know the truth." Having overcome internal doubts, he unlocked the phone. Allison, surprisingly, did not set a password that he did not know it was their common code. And what he saw struck him like a thunderclap. Correspondence lasting almost a year, full of frank confessions, hints of a meeting, hints of intimacy, signed with Tom's name. Messages with hearts, kisses. A photo of Allison and Tom smiling in some hotel room. Jake felt his legs give way. He sat down on the sofa, trying to comprehend everything that was happening. "Damn, this can't be," he whispered, scrolling through the messages. They've been together for a year." Phrases flashed before his eyes. "I can't wait to see you again. Shall we meet tomorrow at 8, as usual? The room is booked." Ollie, you are incredible. Nobody understands me like you do. Jake's heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of his chest. My throat was dry, and a lump of pain and rage swirled in my chest. His best friend, his wife, they dated for a year behind his back. They lied to him every day for a year. What was even more shocking was that Allison, such a champion of family values, was the one who cheated for so long. He felt anger boiling inside him. At that moment, the front door opened and Allison appeared in the hallway. When she saw Jake holding her phone, she turned white as a sheet. "What are you doing?" came out of her lips in a trembling voice. "What am I doing?" he responded, almost breaking into a scream. "What are you doing? How could you?" Allison, you and Tom have been deceiving me for a whole year." He stood up abruptly. The phone fell out of his hands and fell to the floor. Allison rushed towards him, trying to grab him, but Jake pushed her hand away. "Move away," he shouted. For the first time in his life, he raised his voice at her so that there was a genuine threat in it. "Jake, let me explain." Allison was almost crying. Her eyes were full of horror. "Everything is not as you think." "Really?" He waved his hand towards the fallen phone. "Everything is pretty clear there. Photos, messages. Is it all wrong?" She looked down. It seemed like she had no excuses. "Why?" Jake whispered, feeling his throat tighten. "Just tell me why." "We were happy, damn it. I was confident in you like no one else. Tom, he. It started by accident. I didn't notice how I got involved." Allison grabbed her head, trying to find words through her tears. "It was a mistake, but now it's too late. I'm confused." "Confused?" Jake growled. "How can you be confused for a whole year, and with my best friend?" I didn't plan this," she sobbed, squeezing her face with her hands. "I didn't have enough attention care. You're at work all the time. I'm busy too, of course, and we grew apart. And Tom was nearby. He understands me. We have common interests. He helped me with my research." Hearing her try to justify her betrayal as a lack of attention, Jake began to breathe heavily, fighting the overwhelming urge to shake her. "Are you saying that I'm to blame?" he said quietly but threateningly. "That because of my work, because I maintained our house, protected people, you began to have an affair with Tom?" Allison didn't answer. Tears flowed down her cheeks. She looked pathetic, cornered. There was a silence in the room, too heavy for words to cut through. Jake tried to pull himself together. He suddenly remembered all their conversations about morality, about ethics, about social institutions that she so defended in her lectures. For a year, she slept with his best friend and continued to publicly encourage people to be faithful. Hypocrisy has reached cosmic proportions. "Get out," he said quietly, without raising his eyes. "Jake, get out," I said, he shouted, looking straight into her eyes, full of fear. Now, Allison didn't argue. She grabbed her phone from the floor, her bag, and ran out of the house, slamming the door loudly. Jake remained standing in the middle of the living room. He heard the car engine start up outside. But inside his mental space, there was a ringing emptiness in which pain was mixed with shame and a feeling of betrayal. He couldn't figure out how to live on. Everything he believed in was destroyed. Love, friendship, trust are words that have lost their meaning. He wanted to disappear because reality seemed too unbearable. But he was a fighter. And so, sitting on the couch, Jake replayed the facts he had just discovered in his head. The night dragged on endlessly. Jake sat in the dark living room without turning on the light, looking at one point. He began to tremble. He felt an avalanche of contradictory emotions growing inside him with every heartbeat, from hatred of his wife and Tom to the desire to wake up and understand that all this was just a bad dream. At midnight, he got up and went to the kitchen. He poured whiskey into a glass, although he usually didn't drink too much alcohol, but now he didn't care. The first sip burned his throat, but he continued to drink. He needed to dull the pain, to forget, at least for a moment, what he had learned. "This is impossible," he thought. "We've been together for so many years. She always talked about the importance of loyalty." He remembered their acquaintance. They met at a charity evening where he spoke as a young lawyer and she represented the sociological group of the university. Back then, they were both full of ideals. It seemed that they were connected by heaven after all. Both wanted to help people and change the world. And now his life partner turned out to be a stranger, sharing a bed with his closest friend. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, he decided to call Tom. On the one hand, he understood that it was useless, but the rage demanded an outlet. Having difficulty finding his friend's number, he pressed the call button. A few beeps silence. Volume? Pick up the phone, you bastard. Jake hissed into the phone, but the answer was a voicemail. I know everything, do you hear? He shouted as the recording automatically started. Year. You've been lying to me for a year. Why the hell did you come to my house with your friendship and smiles? I'll blow your damn career to hell. He threw the phone aside, feeling his chest tighten with rage, and then threw himself onto the sofa, pressing his hands to his temples. He suddenly felt bad. He ran to the bathroom where he vomited. Probably the mixture of alcohol and nervous tension played a role. Having come to his senses and rinsed his mouth, he looked at his reflection in the mirror. Tired, exhausted, face with red eyes. Where is that confident lawyer who spoke in court without fear or reproach, defending the rights of others? Now he himself needed protection, but there was none. Only himself and this chilling fact of betrayal. At dawn, when the first rays of the sun broke through the windows, Jake lay down exhausted on the bed where he and Allison had once slept. The sheets still carried her scent. He wanted to pick them and throw them away, but couldn't find the strength. Closing his eyes, he finally passed out, exhausted and empty. He woke up around noon to a call on his mobile phone. It was Matt Garcia, his old friend, now a private investigator. They rarely communicated, but now, apparently, something happened. Jake, I'm sorry to bother you. I have some interesting information on the case of one of your clients, Matt began, but quickly stopped, noticing that Jake's voice sounded like he had just been run over by a truck. Hey, are you okay? No, Jake said shortly, feeling a lump in his throat. Damn, did something happen? The words came out of his chest. He began to tell Matt that Allison cheated on him with Tom and that he did not know how to live on. Matt listened in silence, but when Jake finished, the detective gave cold, clear advice. Listen, don't make sudden movements. You are a lawyer. You should know that emotions are a bad advisor. You have the resources to figure it out and plan everything carefully. I want to destroy them, Jake admitted, and there was quiet rage in his voice. I want them to pay for ruining my life. Calm down. You will have to fight on two fronts, divorce and revenge. I speak as a detective. Collect evidence. Without them, you will only be left with screams and reproaches. Evidence? Jake asked. I've already seen her phone. Everything is clear there. This is not enough. Legally, you cannot simply use your wife's correspondence, and this may not be enough for Tom's reputation. You need a serious dossier, and if you want me to help, call at any time. After hanging up, Jake realized Matt was right. Anger, like gasoline, flares up quickly, but in order to strike accurately, preparation is needed. And as a lawyer, he knew that there were procedures without which everything would turn into a useless scandal. However, his first reaction was still to file for divorce. He couldn't afford to tolerate betrayal. I will not live in the same reality with the person who betrayed me, he firmly decided. But before he did anything, he dialed Allison's number. She didn't answer. Then he called her again and again. Finally, she hung up the call and wrote a short message. I'm with a friend. I need time to think about everything. Please don't look for me now. Wonderful, Jake thought, feeling anger burning his insides with renewed vigor. He sat down at the computer and began filling out an electronic application for divorce. Fortunately, in their state, the filing procedure could be started online. He had once helped his clients navigate these forms, but now he filled in his personal information, his wife's name, and the reason: irreconcilable differences. When the process was completed, a notification appeared on the screen that the documents would be registered within 24 hours, and then all that was left was to bring them to the court and pay the fee. Jake clenched his jaw, closed his laptop, and took a deep breath. That's it, there's no turning back. He called the law office where he worked as a partner and warned him that he would take a couple of days off. He lied to his superiors that he had an urgent family emergency. The colleague on the other end of the line expressed sympathy and asked Jake to return as soon as possible. Clients were demanding his attention. Jake promised, but in his heart he knew that his own life was divided, and putting effort into other people's affairs now would not be easy. He knew only one thing: he could no longer stay in a house that reeked of lies. Rising to the bedroom, he hastily packed a suitcase with clothes and pulled out a couple of important documents from the safe. I took a bottle of water from the refrigerator to wash away the last of the hangover and left the house without looking back. Jake rented a room in a small hotel on the outskirts of the city. Simple, no frills, with neutral beige walls and modest furniture. He didn't care. The main thing was not to see the familiar rooms where every object reminded of betrayal. He dropped his bag at the entrance, turned on the dim lamp, and sat on the bed, wondering what to do next. As a lawyer, he knew the divorce procedure thoroughly. But here everything was not so simple. His wife was not just a wife, but a public figure, a professor giving lectures on morality and family values. And his wife's lover is his best friend, a politician running for Congress. This is not just a banal betrayal. It is a huge scandal that can result in public shame for everyone. Maybe this could be so, he whispered, feeling the desire for revenge growing. Why should I hide their dirt? He remembered Matt's words, get the evidence, act smart. Jake picked up the phone and dialed the detective's number. Matt, I agree. Help me check everything, he said when he answered. Hello, buddy. I'm sorry you had to go through all this. But if you're ready, let's meet tomorrow in my office. Okay, just keep everything a secret. Certainly. See you tomorrow. After hanging up, Jake felt a cold determination settle within him. He wasn't just going to get a divorce, he was going to get revenge. Not out of empty anger, but because he believed. People who so cynically destroy other people's lives should not go unpunished, especially if they occupy socially significant positions. The next morning, he went to see Matt. He located his detective office in an inconspicuous building in the city center. A metal sign read, Garcia, Private Investigations. There was a slight disorder inside. Folders with old cases were laid out on tables, photographs of some observation objects hung on the walls. You look disgusting, Matt said flatly, noticing the dark circles under Jake's eyes and his disheveled hair. I feel even worse, Jake admitted, but we need to act. What can you offer? Matt motioned for him to sit down and began to lay out his plan. First, you are already filing for divorce. Great. But don't rush to reveal all the cards. Let her think that you just want to break up, and that's it. Second, for revenge, we need something more serious than correspondence. If your friend politician decided to take advantage of his position to have affairs and, possibly, participate in corruption schemes, then this must be proven. Corruption? Jake asked. He knew that Tom always had gray moves, but he didn't think it could go far. I don't know for sure, but I heard something. They say it is connected with some kind of fraud in the distribution of budget funds for university grants. Maybe Allison is involved too. Jake frowned. If Allison really helped Tom break the law, then her career as a professor will collapse. But damn it, she herself destroyed their family. This means you will have to bear responsibility. How do we collect evidence? Cameras, surveillance, journalistic sources. I have a journalist friend, Rachel Black, who can help bring this to the public if we find confirmation. But we need to start with your access to Allison's personal data, emails, bank statements. Look for something that can connect her with Tom financially. Fine. As a lawyer, I know all their thin spots, Jake grinned gloomily. What about my work? I can't give up on things. Don't throw it away. Just find time for this in parallel. And one more thing, keep your emotions under control. Don't call her, don't write threats, don't do anything that could turn against you in court. Jake nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Pieces of a plan began to form in his head. He was preparing for a long and exhausting journey, but he knew that otherwise he would not receive atonement for the hell into which he was plunged. In the evening, he returned to the hotel, took out his laptop, and connected to cloud storage, where he sometimes saved documents shared with his wife. Fortunately, they shared a password once a sign of trust. Now it has become the key to discovery. He started searching for the university's financial records, checking Allison's emails, which she might have left accessible. As a lawyer, he understood that it would be difficult to officially use this data in court if he hacked her email. But for your own understanding and initial verification, this could help. Among tons of letters from students, colleagues, mailings, and notifications, he found strange correspondence. Fund for support of social innovation, grant for the study of marriage and family problems. There was a whole conversation between Allison and a person from the university's accounting department. The letters included large sums, far in excess of regular grants, and indicated that a significant portion of the funds would be used to conduct opinion polls among potential voters. It all looked like Tom's political campaign was being financed under the guise of scientific research. "Here it is," Jake whispered, reading another letter, which mentioned Tom's name as a partner in conducting research on family policy issues. His fists clenched. This means that Allison not only cheated on him, but also became a participant in a fraudulent scheme, using university funds in Tom's interests. This is already serious. At that moment, a feeling was ignited in him that perhaps fate was giving him a weapon for revenge. "But they thought that I would never know," he said out loud, clenching his jaw. "It's okay, I'll find out everything." He took screenshots, saved the emails to a flash drive, and then turned off the laptop and sat down, trying to calm down. The journey would be long and difficult, but now he had a goal worth fighting for. "They destroyed my family," Jake thought, looking at the empty wall. "I will destroy their careers and reputations. But I will do it according to the rules, without breaking the law, so that they cannot get out." And for the first time since the discovery of the betrayal, he felt that in his soul, amid pain and betrayal, a core was awakening, a lawyer's rage, striving for fair retribution. The next day, Jake walked into the office as if nothing had happened. Colleagues noticed his gloomy appearance, but did not ask unnecessary questions. Everyone knew that he had important processes, and his personal life was a sensitive area. Nodding briefly to the greetings, he walked into his office, where a new client was already waiting for him. After dealing with work issues, Jake decided to call Allison to formally discuss the divorce. After all, he had already submitted the documents, and soon she was supposed to receive a notification. However, Allison did not answer the phone. He left her a dry message. "We need to talk about divorce. Contact me when you can." A few hours later, she answered briefly. "Jake, I understand, but you can't just throw me out of your life. Give me time. I'll go back to the house for things when you're not there." Jake knew she didn't have a home because he himself was now living in a hotel. He didn't object. Let him take what he wants. His main goal is different. On the same day, he went to see his fellow lawyer, who specialized in divorce cases. "Listen, Jake," he said, looking through the documents. "You indicate irreconcilable differences. This is standard. But if you want things to go faster, you need to prove your wife's guilt in treason. Although under our law, this is not necessary for a divorce, it may affect the division of property or alimony." "I understand," Jake replied, holding back his bitterness. "But the main thing is that everything is legal. I have screenshots of the correspondence, but they were obtained from her phone. Maybe it would be better to reach a settlement agreement. You've been together for so many years." "Not this time," Jake snapped, making it clear that there would be no settlement agreement. Later, when he returned to the hotel, Matt called him. "Hello, buddy. There is news. I have Tom under surveillance. So far, I haven't noticed anything particularly hot." "Okay, go ahead," Jake said. "It's important for me to know where he goes, who he communicates with, what amounts are in his accounts. I already have something about university grants. Great, but be careful. Tom is not a fool. He has his own security. You better keep your head down. And I, as a professional, will do everything quietly." After hanging up, Jake sighed. He understood that working on this investigation could take a long time, but he was ready. Every minute spent in disguise, without direct accusations, gave him a chance to collect even more evidence, and the stronger the blow will be. Tom wrote to him in the evening. Short message: "Let's talk. I know you know everything. I have to explain it to you." Jake felt his heart clench with anger. Bastard, he thought. But he still decided to answer, hoping that Tom would blurt out something incriminating. "We can meet tomorrow in my office after work," he wrote. The next day, already closer to 6 in the evening, Tom, dressed in a formal suit with expensive cufflinks, entered Jake's office. His face was tense, but he tried to pretend to be friendly. The smell of expensive perfume filled the room. "Jake, I'm really sorry," Tom began, closing the door behind him. "About what?" Jake asked coldly, without offering to sit down. "About the fact that everything turned out this way. Allison. It just happened. I have to admit, I didn't want to hurt anyone." "Happened? Oh, really?" Jake said sarcastically. "A year, Tom. For a whole year you had an affair with my wife and looked into my eyes, calling me your friend." Tom exhaled and sat down on a chair without waiting for an invitation. "Yes, it's my fault. There's no excuse. But understand, there were feelings between Allison and me. We have very similar views." "Shut up," Jake hissed, gritting his teeth. "I don't want to hear this nonsense. Did you think that I would never notice this? You could have just told me you had feelings. Don't pretend like nothing is happening." "I understand your indignation," Tom nodded, feeling discomfort under Jake's heavy gaze. "I wanted to avoid a scandal, especially now that I have an election campaign. I need your silence." "My silence?" Jake asked, smiling unexpectedly, but there was no joy in his eyes. "Do you think you can buy my silence? Or earn it through friendship?" "Listen," Tom leaned forward. "I am ready to pay you whatever compensation you deem necessary. I know you feel betrayed, and rightfully so, but you don't want a public scandal that will destroy your reputation too. Imagine people saying, 'The wife of a famous human rights activist cheated on him with a politician for a year, and he didn't know about it.' This is humiliating, Jake." For a moment, Jake felt his heart clench. Tom is trying to play on his pride, on the fact that the scandal might make him look like an idiot. But he knew, if not now, then never. "I'm filing for divorce," he said harshly, "and don't even think about offering me money. It's not a question of money. What if I guarantee you that I will help you with your affairs, with your social projects? You know, when I become a congressman, I will have more opportunities." "To hell with your opportunities," Jake flared up, grabbing a folder from the table and throwing it to the side. "Get out of here before I throw you out personally." Tom stood up, trying to maintain his dignity. "You're making a mistake," he warned coldly. "I thought we'd settle things amicably, but if you want war, you'll get it." "Here you go," Jake sharply pointed to the door. "War is war." When Tom left, slamming the door, Jake exhaled. His hands were shaking. The desire to hit Tom right in the face was so strong, but he resisted, realizing that a physical fight would only play into the hands of the politician. "That's it, the masks are off," he thought, looking at the folder lying on the floor. "He will try to destroy me or silence me, but I will not give up." He noticed that Tom's phone was left on the table. Apparently, he left it in a hurry when he jumped up from his chair. Jake grabbed his smartphone and quickly checked the lock. To his surprise, the device was not locked with a password. Perhaps Tom used fingerprint unlocking or Face ID and simply did not have time to activate the lock. In any case, the phone was now open. "This is a gift," Jake whispered, feeling his insides go cold. He instantly looked through the latest calls, messages, and correspondence. There were several important names from the political sphere, some negotiations about financing. One chat in particular stood out: short messages in which he and Allison discussed a meeting at the hotel. He also noticed a letter in the mail about large transfers marked research budget. Quickly taking screenshots and sending them to himself, Jake put the phone in his desk drawer. Let Tom come back for him, and during this time Jake will have everything he needs. Returning to the hotel that evening, Jake was dejected and exhausted, but he felt some satisfaction that he had not lost control and had managed to obtain new evidence. He began to understand that he would have to play hard, but on his own field, the field of the law. Revenge will be cold, measured, and merciless. A few days later, Allison filed her answer to the divorce petition, and what she wrote unsettled Jake. She accused him of abuse and excessive control, saying that he watched her every move, did not allow her to develop professionally, and told her who to be friends with and who not to. To support this, she cited fictitious cases where he allegedly shouted at her and humiliated her in public. "What a bitch," Jake whispered, reading the text. His hands were shaking and anger was burning in his eyes. After all, it was all a complete lie. He called her immediately. "What the hell does all this nonsense mean?" he barked, barely hearing his wife's voice. "It's true," she answered in a cold tone. "You have always controlled my life. I was afraid to admit to you that I had feelings for Tom because I knew that you would lose control. Plus, you didn't let me do my research normally. You demanded that I be at home whenever I stayed late." "Absurd," he exhaled. "You yourself know that this is not so. I never interfered with your career." "Well, let's see what the court decides," she snapped, and there was intransigence in her voice. "I don't want you to get all the property and leave me with nothing. I never wanted to leave you with nothing. You changed it, and now you're making me out to be a tyrant. You're forcing me to resort to serious measures, Eli." She was silent for a couple of seconds, then said, "I'm tired, Jake. You failed me as a husband. Tom turned out to be closer and clearer to me. I know you wish him and me harm, but that won't make you happy." Short beeps were heard. She dropped the call. Jake sat there for a moment, holding the phone in his hand, stunned. "What impudence," he thought. "She destroys my reputation, calls me an abuser, and even teaches me about happiness." But the blow came not only from the court. Hints appeared on social networks that a famous lawyer could be dangerous in personal communication. Some acquaintances and even friends, not knowing the true details, believed the loud headlines. People always look for the fault of someone who appears tough on the outside. To his dismay, several clients canceled their contracts, citing image risks. Rumors spread quickly, and Jake saw his hard-earned reputation begin to crumble at the seams. "Damn," he swore, sitting in an empty office. "She decided to hit me where it hurts most my moral principles." The next day, he was invited to appear on a talk show, where he agreed to come as a human rights expert. But a couple of hours before the broadcast, the presenter called and said, "Sorry, Mr. Reynolds, we have been informed that serious charges of domestic violence have been filed against you. We are forced to suspend your participation until the circumstances are clarified." "This is absurd," he exclaimed. "There's not even an official lawsuit against me." "I understand, but you know how it happens, the reputation of the channel." The presenter, as if making excuses, sighed and ended the conversation. Jake hung up the phone and felt as if he was drowning in quicksand. Once upon a time, he had friends and acquaintances. Everyone treated him with respect. But now they looked at him with suspicion, and some simply remained silent and avoided meetings. Jake understood that this was part of a campaign that Allison and Tom were probably organizing to make him look like a villain and invalidate all his possible accusations against them. If he suddenly decides to bring their affair and corruption scheme to light, they will say, "This man is mentally unstable. He is just taking revenge." "It won't work," he said quietly, clenching his fists until they were white. "I will still prove that they are lying." He called Matt. "I need your help more than ever. It looks like they have started a big campaign against me." "Understood. I have something." Video from the hotel where Tom and Allison met on multiple occasions. "I paid an employee to leak surveillance footage." "Great," Jake nodded. "But this is not enough yet. We need to find something that would connect them with corruption. I have their correspondence and screenshots, but I need a more serious documentary base. Money transfers, names, contracts. I'm working on it. Hang in there, friend. After this conversation, Jake found himself flinching at the word friend. After all, Tom was also a friend, and now, who would have thought? Trying to distract himself from depressing thoughts, he decided to begin preparing for the divorce hearing. He wrote a statement refuting the accusations and provided testimony from several people who saw his relationship with his wife. I collected information that he had never been charged with violence. But most importantly, he wanted to stage a public counterattack to expose Allison's deception. However, lawyers advised not to rush because you could run into a libel suit. As the days passed, the pressure grew. At some point, Jake noticed that the friends with whom he once communicated no longer answered calls or did so through force. Even his longtime colleague, with whom he defended workers' rights, said, "Sorry, I don't want to get into your conflict." This bullying did not break Jake, but it made him realize how weak people are to the manipulation of public opinion. He swore to himself that he would see the matter through to the end and would show everyone the true faces of these progressive hypocrites. Despite his difficult morale, Jake continued to work and at the same time conducted his secret investigation. He met Matt in inconspicuous places, usually in an old cafe near the station, where journalists and acquaintances rarely visited. In the last month, they have already collected an impressive folder with evidence, printouts of email correspondence, financial documents, and video from the hotel. But for a grand revelation, additional evidence was needed, especially that Tom was using university funds for personal purposes. "I have a lead," Matt said, flipping through his notes on his tablet. "There are rumors at the university that the Social Innovation Support Fund, through which Tom received money, is connected to an offshore account." "Great," Jake nodded. "Can I check this? I'm trying to find a way to find out who signed the contracts. They say it's some Linda Morgan, Allison's colleague, or someone from the accounting department. If we can get her testimony, it will be a serious trump card." "I know Linda," Jake remembered. "She once hinted that something was wrong with Allison. Perhaps she will agree to cooperate. Do you think it's worth talking to her?" "I'll try. She might be the key." Jake wrote to Linda via social media, suggesting they meet. At first, she refused, citing being busy, but when she heard that we were talking about a very important matter, she agreed. They made an appointment at a cafe near campus. There we met. Linda was a woman of about 50, with thin lips and short hair, and there was a sense of wariness in her gaze. "Thank you for coming," Jake said, trying to smile. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," Linda replied. "Allison is my colleague, and we have collaborated for a long time. Understand. But you yourself told me that she is not as honest as she seems," he reminded, shrugging. "I have reason to believe that she is involved in the illegal transfer of money for Tom Kendall's political campaign." Linda was silent, taking a sip of coffee. She was clearly confused, not knowing whether to tell what she knew. "Look," Jake continued, "I'm not asking you to lie or fabricate evidence. I need the truth. If you know something that could confirm corruption, say it. Otherwise, they will continue to deceive people. And the university itself may suffer if the scandal comes to light without preparation." "Allison was my friend," Linda finally said, looking away. "But lately, I've seen her change. She began to use her connections with Tom to get large grants. Often the amounts were not spent on real science, but on payment for some dubious services. I don't know the details. I wasn't in the accounting department, but I heard rumors. And recently one employee, Richard Hunt, quit. They say he saw how reports were falsified. Can you give me the coordinates of this Richard Hunt?" "Yes, sure. But I beg you, don't mention my name." "I don't want to be attacked," Linda said fearfully. "I promise," Jake assured her, writing down the contacts. "Thank you for your help." Linda left the cafe, looking around hastily. Apparently, she was afraid that someone from the university would notice her. Jake remained seated, feeling slightly relieved. He had a new witness. In the evening, he met with Matt and discussed a plan for further action. It was necessary to find Richard Hunt, ask him about what he knows about Tom and Allison's machinations. Perhaps this will become an important part of incriminating material. "What about your reputation problems?" Matt asked. "I have a journalist friend, Rachel Black. She is ready to do material about your divorce and your version of events. But is it worth it to us now?" "It's too early," Jake shook his head. "If we come forward with a half-true story now, they will crush us. You need to strike with precision when all the facts are in hand. Then they won't get away with it anymore." "I agree," Matt nodded. "I will continue to follow Tom. He often holds meetings in closed clubs. Perhaps there are people there who can give us evidence." So their secret investigation continued. Jake, torn between work and searching for evidence, noticed how only fragments remained from his former life. But at the same time, he became more and more confident that he was doing the right thing. After all, he fought not just for his wounded pride, but for justice against the hypocrisy that poisoned society. After several days of intense searching, Matt found Richard Hunt, a former university accountant who had quit under mysterious circumstances. He now lived in another city, in a small rented house on the outskirts. Judging by the appearance of his home and the old car in the yard, he didn't have much money. Jake and Matt arrived at his place in the evening so as not to attract attention. Richard greeted them reluctantly, but when he saw Matt's detective license and heard about the purpose of the visit, he tensed. "I left the university because I couldn't stand the way they draw reports," he immediately blurted out when he sat them down on a battered sofa in the living room. "It's not my fault that everything in our accounting department has been put on stream. Otherwise, I myself would have been fired for loss of trust." "Who exactly is responsible for drawing the reports?" Jake asked, taking out a notepad. "I can't say that Allison specifically forged documents," Richard threw up his hands. "But her signatures were on research agreements that were really just cover for, well, Tom Kendall's campaign funding." "How can you confirm this?" "I still have copies of some documents," he admitted after a moment of silence. "If you cooperate with us, we will help you protect yourself," Matt intervened. "Jake is an experienced lawyer. He knows how to use your testimony to save you from prosecution." "Yes," Jake confirmed. "But I need these documents, Richard. This could be the key to getting Tom and Allison out in the open. You don't want them to continue cheating, do you?" Richard sighed, looked at his unexpected guests, and finally made up his mind. He got up from the sofa, went into the next room, and returned with a folder. Opening it, Jake saw printouts of payment orders, which included thousands of sums transferred from university accounts to some non-profit organizations that were just fly-by-night companies. "You see," Richard pointed out, "all of these organizations are actually connected to the Kendall campaign. And here is the signature of Allison Reynolds as the scientific director of the project." Jake's heart sank when he saw his wife's signature, the same elegant flourish that he was used to seeing on cards, gifts, documents. "Are there any signatures from Kendall himself?" he asked with hidden hope. "Alas, no, but his name appears in a couple of places. See the line, Partners, Thomas Kendall." "Great," Jake nodded, feeling his confidence growing. "This could be key evidence of their conspiracy." "Do you promise that I won't go to jail?" Richard asked worriedly. "I will try to do everything so that you are not accused," Jake assured. "You weren't the initiator, were you?" "No, my superiors forced me to. I was just filling out the paperwork." "Then you have every chance to present yourself as a witness and not an accomplice. I will be your lawyer if necessary." Richard nodded, gratitude flashing in his eyes. He was an ordinary person who simply found himself in a system of corruption and could not resist. Now Jake felt that this man was an important ally. Returning to the car, Matt and Jake carefully loaded the folder with documents into the trunk, trying not to attract attention. It was already getting dark in the city, and the lanterns cast long shadows. "Do you understand that we now have a real opportunity to bring them down?" Matt asked as they drove off. "Yes," Jake nodded. but I want this scandal to be explosive and undeniable. It is necessary that journalists receive information in such a way that no one can say that this is my personal revenge. Let everything look like the result of an independent investigation. Rachel Black can arrange this. She is known for her high-profile revelations. You just need to prepare. Agree. Let's first analyze all the documents and draw up a clear chronology, and then we'll contact Rachel. Matt nodded approvingly. They rode in silence, each contemplating the possible consequences. Jake knew that if Tom felt threatened, he would hit even harder. But now they had something in their hands that could destroy Kendall's entire political career and Allison's reputation. It's ironic, Jake thought. She talked so much about honesty and progressive values, but she herself got dirty in banal corruption. In the evening, Jake arrived at the hotel and began studying Richard's papers. The further he read, the clearer the scheme became. The money was allocated as a grant for social research, but part of the amount was transferred to accounts associated with Tom's political party, and the rest was transferred to some dubious companies. Surely, these companies provided campaigning and other election fraud. That's where Tom gets so much money for advertising, he said out loud. And how blind I was for not noticing this before. He recalled all the times Tom had seemingly generously sponsored events, including ones where Allison had performed. Then Jake thought it was friendly support, but it turned out that it was all part of a cunning plan. Now, with irrefutable evidence in his hands, Jake felt stronger. But I also understood that this was not a personal game. The game is taking place at the level of big politics, where the stakes are high and opponents stop at nothing. Perhaps my life will never be the same, he thought, leaning back wearily in his chair. But if I can expose them, then at least I will regain my sense of justice. Jake and Matt devoted the next few days to an in-depth analysis of the collected materials. They systematized data from correspondence, bank transfers, and hotel records, trying to build a logical chain of facts. They had to prove that Allison and Tom acted together. She signed documents using the authority of a sociology professor, and he received monetary benefits for his political campaign. We need to clarify whether there were any direct instructions from Tom for translations, Matt noted, flipping through the next page. So far, we see his name on the documents, but this can be interpreted as a partner in the research and not as a specific recipient of the money. That's true, Jake agreed, tapping his pen on the table. So we need more direct evidence. Maybe Rachel Black will do a little investigative journalism, talk to the university staff who saw everything, find evidence of Tom's participation. I was just about to call her. But I'm sure she needs more intrigue to get the material out, Matt grinned. She specializes in high-profile revelations. If we give her the full package, she will make such a splash in the media that Tom will have to answer awkward questions. And this will be before the elections, Jake added thoughtfully. No matter how hard he tries to hush up the scandal, such a blow will cause serious damage to his reputation. However, thoughts about the scandal with Allison continued to torment Jake. Yes, he had evidence of her involvement in corruption, but his soul still hurt. He once loved this woman and trusted her recklessly. It was impossible to imagine that she would be capable of such a double game. However, in recent weeks, all his doubts about her honesty have already dissipated. All he could do was move forward along the path of revenge. In the afternoon, he stopped by a house he had not entered for several weeks to pick up some personal belongings. The country house seemed alien and lifeless to him. When he opened the door, a musty smell filled his nose. It was clear that the house had been standing for a long time without proper ventilation. There were some papers on the floor in the hallway, apparently mail, which the postman had thrown through the hole in the door. Jake picked up the letters and began to sort through them mechanically. Bills, advertising, some kind of notifications. Among them was a letter from the insurance company addressed to Allison. He wanted to throw it back, but his eyes caught the title, Life Insurance. It seemed strange to him. They had long discussed that each of them had a policy, but Allison seemed not going to change the conditions. Unable to resist curiosity considering that they were still in the process of divorce, he opened the envelope. Inside was a document confirming the change of beneficiary. Allison, judging by the date, changed the terms of her insurance about 3 months ago, specifying the main beneficiary not as Jake, but as T. Kendall. What a bastard, he hissed, crumpling the paper in his hand. This means that even then, 3 months ago, she took out insurance so that in the event of her death, Tom would receive a payment. It was not only an emotional reorientation, but also a financial one. He felt disgusted, and at the same time, this was another piece of evidence showing the depth of their relationship. This can also have implications for the divorce court, reflecting the degree of trust and betrayal. Suddenly, he heard the noise of a motor near the house. Looking out the window, I saw Allison's car. She apparently came to pick up her things. Jake lay low, not wanting to confront her. But when she entered, they inevitably saw each other in the corridor. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to look calm, although there was confusion on her face. "I can ask you too," Jake snapped. "I came to pick up my things." "Me too," she said briefly, biting her lip. "We have to move on with our lives somehow." "Live with Tom?" There was mockery in his voice. "What do you care about?" Allison frowned irritably. "We're already divorced. Consider it." "Yes, I think so." He glanced at the envelope he was holding in his hands. "So you even reissued insurance for him?" Allison turned pale. "You had no right to open my mail," she exclaimed, snatching the envelope from him. "This is illegal. Are you talking about the law?" Jake smiled bitterly. "You, who cheated on your husband for a year, forged papers at the university, and helped Tom get money. Do you still have the nerve to talk about right? You don't understand." She raised her voice. "I did it for the good, for research, to promote ideas that are really important to society." "Stop lying." Jake couldn't stand it and lost his temper. "This is not good. This is a crime. And your ideas are hypocritical. You don't know anything," she hissed. "You've never been interested in my scientific work." "Yes, I didn't know that your scientific work involved scams and getting into bed with my best friend." These words hurt her pride, and she flared up. "You know what?" Allison said. "I'm tired of listening to your insults. I don't care what you think. You think you are a saint, but in reality you are no better. You just don't see your own mistakes, selfish." "Oh, that's how it is." Jake almost laughed at the absurdity of her accusations. "So it's my fault that you and Tom decided to betray me. Okay, I don't want to argue with you. Do what you want." He turned to leave, but she stopped him with words. "I will apply for alimony and half of the property, given your accusations that I cheated on you. You can't prove it in court, and I already mentioned violence. The court will side with me, especially considering public opinion." Jake turned around, rage flashing in his eyes. "Try. Your lies will come out one day. I hope you're ready to answer for everything you've done." Without waiting for an answer, he left the house and slammed the door. My heart was beating loudly in my chest, and my head was buzzing. He knew that a real battle lay ahead of him, but he was ready to go to the end. Returning to the hotel, he took out his phone and dialed Matt's number. He did not answer immediately. Apparently, he was busy with surveillance. "Matt, listen, I just ran into Allison." "And what?" "She confirms that she is ready to use any dirty tricks in court, accusing me of violence and control. But I have one more detail, the insurance that she signed over to Tom. This could be indirect evidence of their connection, but it is unlikely to ruin her reputation." It's still a small thing, but it's useful in the overall picture. Let me tell you this, time is short. It is better to transfer the collected evidence to Rachel Black as soon as possible and start this revelation machine." "Agree," Jake exhaled heavily. "Let's make an appointment." He understood that there was no way back. Once they give Rachel the information, the scandal will explode. But at the same time, Jake felt that this was the only way to stop Allison and Tom's deceitful campaign, and at the same time save his own name from complete destruction. Having collected a complete package of documents, Jake and Matt were ready to begin the exposure operation. But before handing over the material to journalist Rachel Black, they needed to check one more thing: whether it would be easy for Tom or Allison to cover their tracks if it all came to light too soon. Jake knew that once the media leak occurred, their opponents would take drastic steps to protect themselves, maybe even try to frame Jake for good. In the evening, they were sitting in a car not far from an expensive restaurant where Tom was heading. Matt, illuminated by the dim dashboard lamp, looked carefully through binoculars. He watched the entrance, waiting for Tom's black car to appear. "I'm sure he's meeting with some sponsors today," Matt said, still watching. "If he continues to raise money for the election campaign, it means he doesn't feel that the ground is slipping from under his feet. Perhaps he doesn't even realize that we have dug up so much dirt on him." Jake nodded. "But we must be alert. This may not just be a friendly dinner." They waited until a black car drove up to the restaurant. Tom came out, accompanied by two assistants. Then another expensive sedan pulled up to the entrance, and two men in business suits got out. Matt quickly took a few pictures with a camera with a long lens. "Who is this?" Jake asked quietly. "Looks like an oil company lobbyist," Matt chuckled. "I made inquiries. Tom could support the bill on energy reform, but he is promised a portion of the sponsorship contributions. That is, money again. Does this mean the corruption scheme extends beyond one university? Probably yes. If we can link this to the story of money laundering through grants, Tom will definitely be in trouble." They watched Tom and his companions go inside. An hour passed, then another. Finally, the politician came out into the street, shaking hands with his guests. Judging by the satisfied expression on his face, the meeting went well. "I think that's enough," Matt said, taking a series of photos again. "Now we have a bigger picture. Tom is doing business with dubious donors while stealing funds through university grants. This is a whole knot, and if you pull one thread, the whole ball will unravel." "Yes," Jake nodded, feeling even greater determination brewing inside him. "We will destroy his career, and with it, this corruption pyramid." She and Matt spent the entire night organizing the materials. Matt wrote detailed reports with photos and dates when Tom met with different people. Jake formed legal opinions by linking Richard Hunt's documents and the correspondence from Tom's phone. The deeper they dived into the analysis, the larger and more dangerous the idea seemed. It seemed that Tom had established a whole network of financial streams flowing into his campaign headquarters. In the morning, Matt noticed that Jake could barely keep his eyes open. "Did you sleep at all today?" he asked, taking off his glasses and rubbing his tired eyelids. "It doesn't work. As soon as I close my eyes, I imagine Allison and Tom laughing at me. And also this lie about domestic violence." Jake clenched his fists. "I want to immediately publish all the materials, but I understand that we need to wait for the right moment. Be patient. Soon we'll shake up the whole city and the whole country," Matt encouraged. "But for this to work, we need to catch Tom and Allison so that they can't get away. And if it works, I can put an end to their bullying." Jake exhaled, looking out the window. Dawn was beginning, and the sky was turning a soft pink. "I just wish I could survive this storm." They agreed that by the evening they would contact journalist Rachel Black and begin preparing large materials for publication. But before that, Matt planned to recruit several more witnesses to make the story a bomb. The next day, Jake called a taxi and went to the office of his friend, who specialized in matters related to political responsibility. His name was Stanley Coleman, and he was one of the few lawyers who retained confidence in Jake despite the scandalous rumors. They sat in a spacious conference room with panoramic windows overlooking the city's business district. "I looked at the documents you sent," Stanley said, leafing through the printouts. "If everything is genuine, then this could mean a criminal case against Kendall for fraud and illegal use of public funds. And Allison, it turns out, acted as an accomplice. Yes. I signed papers, prepared supposedly scientific reports, and indirectly transferred money to accounts associated with Tom's election campaign." Jake nodded. "Do you think we should go directly to the prosecutor's office?" Stanley thought, drumming his fingers on the table. You can try to immediately transfer everything to law enforcement agencies, but this may take a while. Plus, given that Kendall is a famous figure, he may have connections and the case will be leaked. I would advise first to make a noise in the press to gather public opinion so that the authorities cannot hush up it. It's clear. In this case, that's exactly what we'll do. We'll tell the journalist everything, and then we'll officially contact the prosecutor's office. Good strategy. Just be careful that you are not accused of slander if they suddenly manage to challenge the authenticity of the documents. Stanley looked at him seriously. Are you 100% sure that the documents are not fake and that our correspondence is not forged? Absolutely, Jake said firmly. I have direct sources, including a witness who worked in the university's accounting department. Stanley leaned back in his chair, smiling at the corners of his lips. Well, then go ahead. I will help you if legal difficulties arise. You know, it's even a pity that you and I don't collaborate so often. You can move mountains when you fight for justice. Jake smiled wryly. He was pleased to hear the praise, but he could not forget that all this was happening due to the fact that his close people betrayed his faith in friendship and marriage. After receiving some good advice from Stanley, he left the office and went to Matt to finally meet Rachel Black. The journalist was waiting for them in a small restaurant famous for its secluded booths. She was a woman of about 35, with sharp features and intelligent, piercing eyes. Her materials have repeatedly featured high-profile revelations of fraud in corporations and political circles. When she saw Matt and Jake, she stood up and extended her hand. Finally, she said, sitting back down. Matt told me a long time ago that you have a bomb. But I have to make sure the material is authentic. We'll provide everything, Jake assured her, laying out a heavy folder. Photos, printouts of translations, correspondence, including possible witnesses. Rachel took the top sheets of paper and scanned them. The further she read, the wider her eyes opened. If all this is confirmed, then we can safely talk about one of the biggest scandals in recent years, she said in a quiet but excited voice. Kendall is not just a politician, but also an icon for many voters. Recently, he has been talked about as a new star capable of cleaning up the corrupt system. Oh, the irony. Exactly, Jake grinned. In fact, he himself is part of it. And the woman who appears in the documents as a professor, Rachel clarified, looking up. My future ex-wife, Jake admitted, trying to keep his voice level. She worked actively at the university, signed grants, and covered for Tom. And yes, there was an affair between them. Everything is clear. The journalist paused for a while, as if digesting the volume of information. I have to ask, is there any personal interest here, a desire for revenge? After all, this may affect the independence of the investigation. Jake had been expecting this question. He straightened up and answered firmly. Of course, I have a personal motive. I was betrayed. But I am a lawyer. I have fought for people's rights all my life. Having learned that Tom and Allison are deceiving society and stealing government money, I cannot ignore it. Of course, I have my own pain and my own gain in ensuring that they get what they deserve. But facts are stubborn things, and they speak for themselves. Rachel listened carefully, then nodded. Understand. Well, I'm taking on this matter, but I need some time to check everything. I will write an article and film a short report where the witnesses interviewed will confirm the facts. If possible, I'll connect the TV. But before publishing, I will need to take a comment from Kendall. Of course, Matt said. We only ask that information not leak before the article is published. Otherwise, they may destroy the evidence. Be calm about this, she assured, smiling. I can keep secrets. And then, when everything comes to light, no one will be able to stop the snowball. They agreed on the details of working together and how they would communicate to avoid suspicion. Jake felt a semblance of relief. His revenge plan was finally moving into its decisive phase. He was prepared for the fact that events could develop rapidly and was determined to withstand any onslaught. After the meeting, as they walked outside, Matt tapped Jake on the shoulder. Congratulations, friend. A big step forward has been made. I think everything will move soon. Yes, Jake nodded, inhaling the evening coolness. The only thing left to do is not to lose your head when it all starts. Bitterness, hidden rage, and anticipation of retribution merged inside him. He knew the road would not be easy, but now he had a clear plan. Wait until the media blew the whistle and then take the case to trial. And then perhaps he will feel that his life has found its footing again. While Rachel collected materials for her investigation, Matt continued to watch Tom. The detective wanted to find additional evidence that he was not only using university money, but also directly receiving bribes from lobbyists. However, at some point, Matt realized that he himself had come under suspicion. Tom's people began to track him down. One evening, as Matt was returning from a meeting with one of the possible witnesses, he noticed in the rearview mirror a black SUV that had been following him for some time, neither overtaking nor falling behind. As he turned into an alley, Matt saw the SUV turn into the lane as well, keeping its distance. "Well, there you go," he muttered, trying to remain calm. "It seems that Tom was informed about my walks." He called Jake on speakerphone. "Hey, we have problems. It seems like I'm being followed. If they figure out where I keep all the materials or get in touch with Richard, everything could fall apart." "Crap. What to do?" There was alarm in Jake's voice. "I'll try to break away, but you be ready. If they catch me, call Rachel. Let her urgently publish the article." There is nothing left to lose. Matt tried to cover his tracks. He made a couple of circles around the block, then drove onto a busy highway and dived into traffic, trying to get lost among the many cars. The SUV loomed in the mirror for a while, but then disappeared. Once he was sure he was no longer being followed, Matt exhaled. "Ugh, I'm off the hook for now," he said into the phone. "But you have to be careful. Tom definitely suspected something. Be careful, too." "I don't want to lose you and all our hard work," Jake replied, sighing with relief. The story of the persecution alarmed them both. Now they knew that time was not on their side. Tom and Allison may take preemptive action, which means the scandal could erupt in unpredictable ways. Jake was convinced that the truth protected them, but he understood that in the world of politics, the truth often drowns in a sea of manipulation. The next day, he decided to be proactive. Having met with Rachel, they agreed to start publishing the article in a few days in order to strike first. The journalist agreed, but noted that she wanted to interview a key witness, preferably Richard Hunt, if he decided to speak, albeit anonymously. Jake met with Richard and explained to him that without his real testimony, the press might consider the article custom-made and question it. Richard was scared at first. "Do you want me to publicly confess? My family will be killed." "Richard," Jake began softly, "I understand that this is scary. But if we don't get the public's attention, Tom might hush it up. On the other hand, if you speak anonymously and we identify you as an inside source, this will enhance the effect. What if they figure out that it's me anyway? We will protect you. I will take care of your safety. Plus, you will have the support of the media. No one will risk removing a witness who attracts such attention." Richard doubted for a long time, but eventually agreed. Having gathered his courage, he agreed to give Rachel an interview, where he would talk about the gray schemes at the university. They came up with a pseudonym for him and planned to change his face and voice on the recording to protect his identity. Thus, they laid the foundation for the imminent explosion of a scandal. The media will receive documents and the words of a person from the inside. Now all that remained was to wait for the day of publication and reporting. However, Jake did not find peace. The situation in the divorce court was also heating up. Allison, through her lawyers, insisted that her husband was a tyrant and her victim. Jake was called to the next meeting, where the judge wanted to hear both sides. He understood that without direct evidence of his innocence, except for words, it would be difficult for him, because public opinion was inclined to side with the injured woman. The day before the hearing, he received an anonymous message on his phone. "Leave this matter, or your reputation will be completely finished off. Do you think people will forget your aggressive antics?" So they started blackmailing, Jake thought gloomily. But he was ready to risk everything to bring Tom and Allison to clean water. He wasn't going to give in. Evening came. Tired, Jake returned to the hotel where he lived. Having crossed the threshold, he felt a sharp longing for a house that was no longer home for him. Of course, he still had memories of happy moments when Allison seemed to him a reliable partner. But those days are gone forever. Lies and betrayals swallowed up all good feelings. He turned on the TV and accidentally ended up on a political show where experts were discussing the upcoming elections. Suddenly, Tom appeared on the screen, talking with a smile about the need for reform in the educational sphere, about fair budget allocations, and about the importance of family values in society. Jake almost threw the remote at the wall when he saw his smug face. "It's okay, my friend. Soon you will have to answer for your words," he muttered through his teeth, turning off the TV. All that remained was to continue to wait for the right moment. But in the darkness of the room, illuminated only by the dim light of street lamps, he suddenly felt that loneliness was becoming unbearable. The heavy burden of revenge and public struggle frightened him, no matter how much he convinced himself of his fortitude. "I'm a lawyer, I know the rules," he repeated to himself. "I must go forward steadfastly. Any weakness is to their advantage." But his tormented soul that evening screamed the opposite. He wanted at least a little consolation, support, and human intimacy, which he was now deprived of. However, there was no point in returning to former friends. Too many turned away from him, having seen enough of the gossip on the internet, and new connections had not yet been established. Realizing that he would never have thought a couple of months ago that life would turn upside down like this, he clenched his fists, forced himself to come to his senses, and began to prepare documents for tomorrow's meeting. "There will be time to cry about myself later," he decided. "The main thing now is to get the job done." The divorce hearing was scheduled for this morning at the city courthouse. The gray hall with high ceilings, where dozens of similar cases were usually considered, was surprisingly crowded today. It seemed that Jake's name as a prominent lawyer and public interest had fueled the press, with several reporters hanging around in the hallways hoping to snag a comment. When Jake entered, he noticed that Allison was already sitting with her lawyer, a middle-aged woman in a sharp suit. The wife was dressed in a dark gray dress, her hair was tied up in a bun, her facial expression was distant and cold. Seeing Jake, she only glanced at him without saying hello. Mr. Reynolds, his own lawyer, Tina McGuire, turned to him. "We are ready. But remember, a lot of unpleasant things may happen today. Don't take it personally. Your job is to remain calm and provide the facts." "I understand," Jake muttered. The moment came when they were invited into the courtroom. The judge, a bespectacled woman with a sharp gaze, asked the parties to identify themselves and get down to business. Allison's lawyer said her client wanted to limit her contact with Jake because he was allegedly abusive, controlling, and even physically violent towards her. "That's a lie, Your Honor," Tina countered calmly as soon as Allison's lawyer finished. "We can present evidence and show that all these accusations are unsubstantiated." "We have testimony from family friends," Allison's lawyer retorted, "who saw Mr. Reynolds raise his voice and insult my client in a public place." "Raising your voice does not equal domestic violence," the judge noted, raising her eyebrows. But then Allison herself spoke, and her voice trembled. "Your Honor, I was afraid to go to the police because he is an influential lawyer. I thought he would ruin my career. He always wanted me to be the perfect wife. And when I began to develop in science, he began to reproach me for not paying attention to him." Listening to her, Jake felt everything boiling inside him with indignation. He saw how she skillfully played on emotions, presenting the facts in a light favorable to herself. He clenched his fists and reminded himself not to lose his composure. His turn to speak came later. "Your Honor, I respect my wife and her work." He never stopped her from developing. "The only reason we are getting a divorce is because of her months-long infidelity with my now ex-best friend. I have evidence of her correspondence, photographs, and other materials confirming the betrayal." Allison's lawyer immediately perked up. Your Honor, we are talking about domestic violence, and he changes the topic to adultery. Does infidelity justify violence? I didn't hit her. Never, Jake snapped, raising his voice. She's making it up. Yes, I was angry when I found out about the deception, but I am not in the habit of raising my hand against a woman. Please maintain order, the judge warned, banging her gavel. We will consider both her accusations and your statement of treason. I want to see the facts. Tina, at Jake's signal, presented the court with printouts of Essam's messages in which Allison wrote frank confessions to Tom, as well as photos from the hotel received from Matt. The judge ran her eyes over the papers. Her face remained impenetrable, but her eyebrows raised slightly. Let's see. However, this is a moral rather than a legal issue, she noted. In our state, adultery may be taken into account when determining alimony, but is not directly a crime. As for allegations of violence, specific confirmation is required. We are going to provide evidence from Allison's acquaintances, said her lawyer. People saw his aggressive behavior. But fortunately, the judge then had questions about the details of this evidence. It became clear that Allison's defense did not have genuine documents, medical certificates, police reports, but only the words of witnesses, many of whom were from Tom's circle and were clearly interested. The judge postponed her decision, saying more investigation was needed, and set the next hearing date. The parties had less time, but no one had any clarity on how the issue would be resolved. When the meeting ended, Jake went out into the corridor and saw Allison making some comments to the reporters. She spoke in a whiny voice about her terrible marriage and her husband's oppressiveness. When they saw Jake, the journalists rushed to surround him, showering him with questions. Mr. Reynolds, comment on your wife's accusations of domestic violence. Do you think that she is simply trying to avoid responsibility for treason? Your colleagues say that you are losing your reputation. Jake raised his hand for silence. Dear ones, I have already said everything in court. Her accusations are baseless. We are in the process of divorce, and I hope the truth will come out. What about the rumors that you are preparing a loud expose against Tom Kendall? This question took him by surprise. Looks like there are leaks. Jake felt his heart beat faster. However, he understood that it was impossible to reveal details now ahead of time. No comments, he said firmly, and, pushing away from the crowd, walked towards the exit. Along the way, he noticed Allison following him with a look in which, in addition to contempt, there was something like fear. Perhaps she guessed that he would soon show her in a completely different light. We're already close to our goal, Jake thought as he got into the car. He could only hope that his and Matt's investigation wouldn't fall through at the last moment. 3 more days later, which seemed like an eternity to Jake, Rachel Black called him on his cell phone in the middle of the night. I know it's late, but I have urgent news. There was excitement in her voice. I plan to release the article tomorrow morning. I already have a recording of the interview with your witness. I have documents, and we have verified their authenticity in several independent sources. Everything is ready. Great. Jake got out of bed and turned on the light to come to his senses. What do you think the reaction will be? I think the effect will be colossal. Tom does not expect this blow now, and the elections are very close. Tomorrow morning, I will give an announcement, and then by lunchtime, I will publish the full text. I'm sure other media will pick it up. Understood. If additional comments are needed, I'm ready, he nodded, feeling a nervous tremor. The revenge he was preparing was already on the doorstep. They briefly discussed the details. It turned out that Rachel was planning a simultaneous release of the material and video report, where an interview with Richard Hunt would appear in encrypted form. She only confirmed that she had fully edited their words, and also included legal review to ensure readers understand the seriousness of the situation. This meant that in the morning the city would wake up to claps of thunder, and Tom himself would receive a crushing blow to his reputation. Having turned off the phone, Jake could not fall asleep for a long time. He thought that it would all end soon, or conversely, that it would just begin. After publication, Tom will have to justify himself, give comments. Perhaps he will try to accuse Jake of slander. but they have enough evidence. And yet, Jake's soul was torn by tension. For so long, he had been accumulating resentment, pain, preparing a counterattack. And now, perhaps, he was approaching the climax that would change everything. In the morning, as soon as he opened his eyes, his phone exploded with notifications. Messages, calls, mentions on social networks, everything mixed up in an unimaginable mess. He quickly went to the website of the newspaper where Rachel worked and saw a loud headline on the main page. Corruption at the university, Kendall's campaign is under suspicion. Subtitle: Sexual relationship with a professor and laundering of budget funds through scientific grants. Sensational revelations from an informed source. This is it, flashed through his head. His heart was pounding loudly as he scanned the article. It mentioned internal accounting documents, a pseudonymous witness who told how exactly the money was redistributed, and the name Professor E. Reynolds. Moreover, there were direct hints about the connection between this same professor and Tom Kendall, a famous candidate for Congress. At the end of the article, there was a note. The reporter asked Tom Kendall for comment, but his representatives declined to comment on the situation until further clarification. At the same moment, the cell phone rang. It was Matt. "Have you seen it?" he asked loudly, not hiding his delight. The article is already gaining popularity in all social networks. "This is a blast, Jake." "Yes, I read it." Jake felt himself smiling involuntarily, although anxiety remained inside. "We just have to wait for the reaction." The reaction came quickly. By lunchtime, news channels were discussing the scandal. Many experts shook their heads in disbelief. Kendall, is he really involved in corruption too? However, the documents that surfaced, as well as an interview with an internal source with a changed voice, but quite clear facts, aroused a storm of suspicion. On social networks, a hashtag with Kendall's name reached the top. People were divided into two camps. Some were indignant and felt deceived. Others fiercely defended the honest politician, believing that this was a dirty provocation. Tom himself remained silent for a long time. Only in the evening he issued a brief statement where he called the article slander fabricated by people who want to disrupt my campaign. However, further problems arose. Journalists began to dig deeper, found strange grants in the university's documentation, and some students and employees began to admit that they had long noticed abnormal money in research projects. The headlines were full of messages. Another clean politician ended up in dirty schemes. As for Allison, her name has also appeared in reports, but there has been no official confirmation of her role yet. The university issued a short communiqué saying it would conduct an internal investigation into the facts reported in the media. Allison was absent from social media during the day, and her lectures at the university were suddenly canceled due to family reasons. Jake understood that not only Tom's career was crumbling, but also his wife's scientific reputation. "It's not evening yet," Jake said to himself as he watched the news broadcasts on local channels in the evening. "This is just the beginning." He again felt a strange duality. On the one hand, joy that the truth was coming out; on the other, sadness that he was involved in such a destructive event. After all, yesterday she and Allison were the perfect couple, and Tom was the best friend, and now everything was in ruins. Still, Jake couldn't afford to feel sorry for them. They themselves ignited this fire of betrayal, and now, when the flames engulfed their lives, he could only watch as they rushed about. "So we'll see which of us comes out of this hell alive," he thought bitterly, turning off the TV. The next day, before dawn, Jake was awakened by the persistent ringing of his hotel room door. He, sleepy, in pajamas, opened it, expecting to see one of the hotel workers, but Allison stood on the threshold, pale, with tear-stained eyes. They looked at each other for a moment, remembering that they were husband and wife, and now separated by a chasm. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he muttered, stepping aside. He didn't want to make a scene in the hallway, and one could expect sidelong glances from the hotel staff at 5 in the morning. She walked inside and sat down on a chair, clasping her head in her hands. Jake noticed that she was wearing regular jeans and a sweater, no makeup, and her hair was disheveled. She looked exhausted, as if she hadn't slept for several nights. "You arranged all this, right?" she finally asked, looking at him. "What are you talking about?" Jake chuckled, although he understood what she was getting at. "Don't pretend. An article, an investigation about Tom and me. I know that these are your hands, or your detective's hands." She was trembling, either from anger or from exhaustion. "Have you decided to destroy us?" "You destroyed yourself, Allison," he answered, trying to remain calm, although everything inside was compressed into a tight knot. "I just showed the public the truth about how you deceived people and stole money under the guise of research." "Damn it, Jake. You know that I didn't want to steal. I believed that we were doing socially significant projects." Her eyes turned red from tears. "Yes, maybe there were dubious translations, but I trusted Tom. And now all this is presented as if I was the main criminal. Didn't he deceive you? Maybe he deceived me." Jake threw up his hands. "I'm sorry if you, too, fell victim to his machinations. But you signed those papers, Eli. Your signatures are there." She covered her face with her palms. "I don't know how to live now. The university launched an internal investigation. I have already been suspended from lectures. Students write nasty things on social networks. I'll lose everything I've worked towards for years." "Well," Jake said dryly, "now you understand how I felt when I found out about your betrayal, and then also the accusations of violence. You destroyed everything that connected us." "I was stupid," she moaned, clutching the edges of her sweater with her hands. "I just didn't have enough attention. I felt lonely, I thought. Tom understood me. But I didn't want it to turn out like this." He was silent, experiencing a painful mixture of pity and bitterness. He still saw her as the woman he loved, but he understood that she herself was responsible for everything. "Stop all this," she suddenly exclaimed, jumping up nervously. "You can do it, Jake. Admit that this is all just your revenge. Retract these articles, tell them they are fake. I will do everything so that we agree." "What articles? Am I a journalist?" he answered sharply. "People themselves figured out what you were doing. And no, I cannot and do not want to stop the truth." "I hate you," she hissed through her tears. "You are ruthless. Always been like this. Only now I understood. You want to destroy me. You contradict yourself. Then you say that I didn't pay attention to you. Now you say that I'm ruthless. But that doesn't matter anymore. I don't like to remind you, but I'm just a person who didn't want to be made a fool." He walked to the door, opened it, and motioned for her to come out. "Go away, Allison. I'm not going to listen to your reproaches anymore. You wanted freedom, here it is. But people pay the bills for betrayal and crime." She walked past him silently, pausing for a moment, as if hoping for a different solution. Then she lowered her eyes and left the room. After closing the door, Jake felt himself shaking. This meeting stirred up old feelings because no matter how hard he tried to appear cold and vindictive, he could not deny that part of his soul still remembered the time when they were together. But there was no turning back. The mechanism of exposure has already been launched, and Allison and Tom will have only one option: take the blow or try to justify themselves. Jake made his choice, and he didn't regret it. A week after the high-profile publication, things took an even more serious turn. The prosecutor's office announced the launch of an official investigation into Tom Kendall and the potential initiation of a criminal case based on the facts set out in the articles. The political world exploded. Some demanded that Kendall leave the race, others spoke of a political order. Tom himself swore on TV that he was not guilty of anything and accused the ill-wishers of making things up. However, the evidence against him grew more and more. For Jake, the most unexpected thing was a visit to his office from a prosecutor who wanted to talk to him personally. It was the assistant district attorney, a short man with glasses who introduced himself as Anthony Stark. "We know that it was you who handed over key documents to the journalists," Anthony said, sitting opposite Jake in his office. "Officially, thank you for not standing aside. But I have questions. Where exactly did you get these materials?" Jake was prepared for this question. He understood that prosecutors would want to make sure that the data was obtained legally. I am a lawyer representing the interests of one of the university employees who wished to remain anonymous. He spoke about schemes that were carried out through institute grants. I received some of the documents from him. Others are from public sources. Do you understand that if criminal proceedings are opened, you may have to testify and reveal the source? I'm ready to cooperate within the law, Jake replied, but it is important to protect my client and witness from prosecution. Anthony nodded, taking off his glasses. We will take this into account. So far, at the verification stage, your documents seem reliable. In any case, the role of Kendall and all those involved will have to be sorted out. I understand, Jake said, feeling relieved. It means that the prosecutor's office is serious and is not going to hush up the case. As he left, Anthony remarked, by the way, my superiors asked me, what is your motivation? After all, you are a lawyer, but it seems that you are acting against your wife, or already an ex-wife. Soon to be an ex, Jake corrected him. My motivation, is it true? I was betrayed, but the main thing is that I see how society's faith in justice collapses when such types climb into power. I couldn't remain silent. Well, that's noble, Anthony said reservedly, but you must be prepared for dirty attacks in response. All the best, Mr. Reynolds. After this visit, Jake felt that the matter was finally moving beyond his personal revenge and becoming an issue of national importance. This was a little scary, but it also inspired confidence. Tom and Allison had less and less chance of hiding. A few days later, another divorce hearing took place. This time, the situation was different. The judge was clearly aware of the scandal surrounding Allison. Tina McGuire's lawyer has prepared documents confirming that Allison was suspended from the university due to official misconduct, and this is unlikely to play into her hands in the division of property or alimony. Allison looked broken. She no longer held herself with the same confidence, spoke quietly, and did not try to announce violence to the whole room. The lawyer tried to play on the judge's feelings, saying that my client's emotional state was depressed due to slander in the media, but everyone understood. After publications about her role in corruption, sympathy for her dried up. So, the judge said, looking at the documents, taking into account the new circumstances, we must reconsider the requirements for the division of property. The court cannot ignore that Mrs. Reynolds may be involved in illegal activities. This affects its financial reliability. If you, Mr. Reynolds, insist on depriving her of her right to shared housing, we will consider it. I'm not demanding that she be left homeless yet, Jake answered, but I don't agree to pay alimony. She had a job and the ability to support herself until she got involved in fraud. The judge nodded and temporarily deferred the decision, setting a date for the final hearing. Changes in the matter were obvious. If previously Allison tried to make herself look offended and hoped for support, now her position has been greatly shaken. When the court day ended, they ran into each other in the hallway. Allison looked even more lost than the day before. She wanted to say something, but Jake walked past, pretending not to notice. There was too much deception between them to have heartfelt conversations now. While the divorce proceedings were going on, the public continued to discuss Tom's loud revelation. As part of the preliminary investigation, the prosecutor's office interviewed witnesses, and new details emerged in the media. Former employees of his headquarters have turned up somewhere, claiming that they were paid to keep silent about dubious sources of funding. A big political hurricane was brewing. Tom, not used to such an onslaught, tried to defend himself in a public field. He held a press conference where he called loyal journalists. Jake was watching the live broadcast on TV. Tom had his campaign poster hanging behind him, and the politician himself was talking about slander with a deliberately indignant look. I am ready to confirm my innocence and provide all financial reports for the campaign, he said, addressing the cameras. We see that behind this, there are people who want to denigrate me and disrupt the elections. My lawyers have already filed a defamation lawsuit. We will fight. Mr. Kendall, someone shouted from the audience, What can you say about your relationship with Professor Allison Reynolds? The documents indicate that it is her signatures that are on the false grants. Miss Reynolds is a respected teacher. We talked about a social project. I cannot be responsible for her every step, but I am sure that she was also framed. Perhaps someone falsified the signatures or distorted the context. Tom spoke confidently, but beads of sweat glistened on his forehead. So you deny a romantic relationship with her? The question came again. Tom paused, looking at the camera. Then he muttered, I'm married, I have a family. All these rumors about the romance are just dirty insinuations. It doesn't surprise me that such base speculation comes to light before the elections. What an impudent person, Jake thought, turning off the TV. Tom lied, looking the whole country in the eye, denying both the fact of the affair and involvement in the fraud. But now, when the matter has come to the prosecutor's office, simple denial is not enough. Time was working against him. Soon Tom was nevertheless summoned to the prosecutor's office to give official explanations. There was enormous interest in the case. The press stood guard outside the building, trying to capture the appearance of the politician. Kendall got out of the black car, accompanied by his lawyers, and walked briskly inside. But the smile on his face no longer looked as confident as before. Meanwhile, the university began its own storm. The rector convened an emergency meeting at which the results of the internal audit were discussed. It turned out that several large grants did go to organizations associated with Kendall's campaign. Allison, as project manager, was directly responsible for the waste. The official report had not yet been published, but everyone understood everything. When Allison tried to enter her office, the security guard politely asked her to leave the building. This is a temporary measure during the investigation, he said, not without sympathy. Sorry. So the scandal consumed not only the political world, but also the academic community. Jake looked at it and thought, this is exactly what I wanted. But why didn't my soul feel better? Maybe because, while destroying Allison's life, he understood that this was once his wife, his loved one. However, after all the insults and lies, he saw no other way. Moreover, now that the case had acquired such proportions, his personal pain played only a secondary role. Another 2 weeks passed, filled with intense events. In the end, the prosecutor's office decided to open a criminal case against Tom under the article of fraud with budgetary funds. This sounded like a bolt from the blue for his supporters, many of whom until the last hoped for a miraculous salvation of the reputation of their idol. But the onslaught of revealing materials, the testimony of a witness, Richard Hunt, and other evidence proved too serious to be ignored. Tom, finding himself under criminal persecution, was forced to withdraw his candidacy from the elections. This was the final collapse of his political ambitions. The news was broadcast on all channels. The scandalous candidate Thomas Kendall, accused of corruption and connections with a professor, is withdrawing from the election race. A wave of indignation and disappointment swept through voters. The promising political star turned out to be a banal swindler. Nightmarish days began for Tom. He had to hire an army of lawyers to fight off the charges, with a trial looming ahead. It soon emerged that his connections were much deeper: lobbyists, secret deals, fictitious companies. And the affair with Allison itself was also finally revealed. Irrefutable evidence was found, including messages from the phone that Jake had once managed to save. Now it was pointless for Tom to lie. He could only try to shift the blame to others and look for mitigating circumstances. As for Allison, the university decided to fire her due to loss of confidence. In a public statement, the rector announced that a teacher has no right to use the authority of the university for dubious purposes. Of course, the matter was not limited to just one dismissal. A lawsuit could also be brought against Allison because her signatures were on the documents. But the prosecutor's office waited for the final of the official investigation. One way or another, the career she had been building for years collapsed overnight. The final act of this dramatic downfall was the leaking of the hotel camera footage where Tom and Allison were meeting. An unknown person, although Jake knew that this was Matt's work, passed these recordings to several tabloids, and they without hesitation published footage, how the respectable politician and the professor entered the room holding hands, how they hugged in the corridor. Although the videos themselves did not contain explicit pornography, they were enough to prove an intimate relationship. Society exploded completely. The famous champion of progressive values turned out to be an ordinary hypocrite. Jake, watching all this, felt both satisfied and empty. He managed to destroy the careers of his wife and friend, but did it bring happiness? He suddenly realized that revenge had given him only a short shot of adrenaline. Now that Tom and Allison were literally erased from public space when they stood in front of the ruins of their lives, Jake had no object left to hate. But there was no lightness either, only fatigue and awareness of the huge hole that had formed in his soul after everything he had experienced. On the last day before the final divorce trial, he sat in his hotel room, looking out the window where the street lights flickered in the rain. The thought was spinning in my head. So what next? I ensured that their lives went downhill, but will this give me back my lost years, my trust, my peace of mind? He felt that the only thing left was to finish the divorce proceedings and then move on, even if he did not know where. The day has arrived for the final divorce hearing. There was tense silence in the courtroom. Allison came without much support. Apparently, her friends and colleagues did not want to be associated with the disgraced professor. Jake came with Tina McGuire. The judge quickly got down to business, since all the formalities had already been settled. So, Mr. Reynolds, Mrs. Reynolds, we looked at all the circumstances: infidelity, accusations of violence that were not confirmed, the financial situation of the spouses. We also take into account that Mrs. Reynolds has been suspended from work and is involved in a corruption scandal. The court makes a decision on divorce. As for the division of property, the house and most of the assets remain with Mr. Reynolds. No alimony is awarded in favor of Mrs. Reynolds. The judge's words sounded to Jake not so much as triumphant, but as a fair conclusion to this whole story. He saw Allison's face twitch as the judge read out the verdict. She lost everything, even the chance for financial support, because now her reputation was ruined, and in the eyes of the law, she did not deserve much sympathy. When the judge announced the decision, the hall slowly emptied. Allison stood near the door, her eyes downcast, as if she was expecting something. Jake didn't want to look at her, but she came up, stopping in her step. "Well, congratulations," she said quietly. "You won." Fatigue and bitterness were heard in her voice, but without the former aggression. Jake looked at her and suddenly did not see in her the former bright person whom he had once loved, but only a shadow, exhausted and lonely. "We both lost, Eli," he said quietly in response. "I never wanted it to end like this. But you yourself know where it all went." She sighed heavily and lowered her eyes. "I don't ask for forgiveness. I know it's too late. Just wanted to say, thank you for everything that was good." "Goodbye," was all Jake said, not knowing what else to add. He walked out of the courthouse and breathed in the fresh air, as if trying to free himself from a heavy burden. Divorce, revenge, public scandal, all this is behind him. All that remains is the life that awaited him ahead. He didn't know what it would be like, but he felt that perhaps cleansing himself of lies would give him a chance to start over. Soon he decided to sell the house in which he lived with Allison. There were too many memories within those walls. He invested the money from the sale into creating free legal advice for those who, like him once, found themselves victims of betrayal, corruption, or unfair public opinion. He rented a small office and recruited a staff of volunteers, young lawyers who wanted to help people for the idea. "Are you sure this is beneficial?" a colleague once asked him after learning about the plans. "I don't think it's about profit," Jake smiled. "I want to change something for the better. If there is less pain and injustice in the world, then I will be happy." Several months have passed. Things went well. Clients came to Jake with a variety of problems. Some complained about an unscrupulous employer, some about domestic violence, some about slander in the media. Jake felt that now he was not just a lawyer, but a person who had experienced all this himself and could truly understand what it was like to be left without protection. As for Tom and Allison, their fates were sad. Tom was put on trial, and in order to reduce his sentence, he made a deal with the investigation. As a result, he received a suspended sentence, but completely lost his political prospects and reputation. Allison tried to get a job at other universities, but she was rejected everywhere, and the prospect of criminal liability still hung over her. There were investigations into her participation in corruption schemes. The fate of Jake's ex-wife was now in her own hands. She could try to find ways of redemption or sink into obscurity. Meanwhile, Jake, although he remained lonely, finally found inner peace. He no longer felt the burning pain that burned his soul after the discovery of treason. Gradually, he learned to look into the future with hope rather than with bitterness. Sometimes he thought about someday letting love into his life again, but he was in no hurry yet. Now his soul has not healed enough to completely trust a new person. Time passed, the city lived its own life. The scandals surrounding Tom and Allison died down, but left a deep imprint in the public consciousness. People have seen how easy it is to fall from the pinnacle of success by lying and pretending. And Jake's story became an example of the fact that sometimes truth and justice are stronger than any political intrigue and hypocrisy. Standing at the door of his new office, looking at the sign, Jacob Reynolds' Legal Advice. Free help to those in need, he smiled, remembering the path that brought him here. From a kind family lawyer who believes in loyalty and justice, he has gone through the crucible of betrayal, disappointment, and revenge and emerged cleansed, strong, ready to begin a new chapter. The wind moved his hair. He took a deep breath, feeling that freedom and peace were the most precious gift that fate could give him after so many trials. Now there were no more heroes or villains, just life going on day after day, and he has an eternity ahead of him to find new meaning in it, and perhaps new love. Thus ended the story of Jake, once deceived, but not broken. Revenge did not bring him complete satisfaction, but it allowed him to regain his sense of justice and free himself from the yoke of illusions. And at the same time, she made him a little wiser and kinder to those who truly value and trust. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.